She hadn't seen them in over 2 years, and the world had moved on without mercy. The wind carried no scent of them. The nights gave no answer to her calls, and yet, when the gate creaked open and 3 grown cheetahs stepped into the light, she didn't need time to remember. Because her body already knew, her heart already knew. And in the stillness that followed where no sound dared to rise, the air between them trembled with something stronger than memory, something ancient and wordless, forged in pain, and silence and sleepless waiting. It wasn't logic that drew her forward. It was the ache that never left the wound that never closed, and the wild, impossible hope that even after distance, even after despair, something in them still belonged to her, and in her still lived for them. Each morning she moved the same way, slow, deliberate, tracing the edges of her enclosure, as if measuring a memory. The dry grass brushed her sides the same way it once had in the open wild, but now there were fences where horizon used to be. Her body was lean, her stride silent, her eyes always scanning not for prey but for something missing. Her keepers watched her with quiet worry. She ate just enough, slept just enough, survived, but never softened. Sometimes at dusk, she would sit motionless facing the far side of the pen where shadows stretched long and golden and the wind carried sounds from beyond the trees. And in those moments her ears would twitch toward a phantom chirp. Her tail would flick as if waiting for tiny paws to stumble over her own, and though her breath stayed steady and her muscles held firm, attention lived just beneath the surface. Not visible, not loud but endless, a pulse of absence that beat beneath everything she did, everything she didn't do. Even in stillness, she was listening, reaching back towards something she could no longer touch, but had never truly let go. The moment the tranquil haze broke, it was not with a roar, but with the shattering quiet that comes just after a scream. Metal twisted around air and earth flipped skyward. Claws dug for something solid and found only air. Her body curled without thought, a shield of blood and instinct around the trembling forms, pressed against her when the world stopped moving. She did not. She would not rise, but she would not leave them either, not when hands reached, not when voices shouted, not when needles pierced her side and darkness took her like a tide pulling her under. She fought until she couldn't, and when she woke, they were gone, and no scent, no sound, no fragment of them remained. The cage around her now was clean too bright. It smelled of nothing familiar. No grass, no dust, no warmth, only glass and steel and waiting. She stopped running, stopped speaking, stopped being who she had been. Her eyes dulled, her muscles slackened, but something inside her stayed awake always. Some thread pulled tight, refusing to forget, refusing to give in at night when everything else slept. She would sit with her back to the keepers, her face toward the wind, and make a sound low and hollow. Not a cry, not a call, but something in between, and it echoed across months, across seasons, across years. On the other side of that silence, 3 young cheetahs paced enclosures of their own, never quite calm, never quite wild growing, but incomplete, something deep in their bones, restless, some scent they could not chase, some warmth they could not return to. And though no one saw the shape of their grief, it stretched across the distance between them, and her silence not broken but endured. Let me pause here for just a moment and ask you, where are you listening from right now? Have you ever had someone, maybe a person or even an animal, remember you after months or years apart? That feeling when time doesn't erase the bond. It stays, quiet, but alive. If stories like this speak to your heart, hit follow. There's so much more ahead, and every chapter gets a little closer to the soul. It began with a scent so faint, it could have been imagined dust kicked up by another animal, or the fading trace of a memory clinging to the wind. But the way her head lifted, the way her muscles tensed, it was as if her body recognized something her mind had forgotten. And days later, it came again, not in the air this time, but in the hands of a human. A photo dropped from a folder, crumpled at the edges. 3 young cheetahs, caught mid-run, their spots distinct, their eyes familiar, and something in her Chest cracked open, a sound she hadn't made in months, rose up uninvited, raw, not pain, not joy, but memory in its purest form. And far away, a technician scrolling through medical records paused at a blood report. The numbers aligned perfectly. Names, dates, cells speaking truths, where mouths could not. Her cubs were not only alive, they were thriving somewhere, breathing under the same sky, and the weight of that realization was too much to hold, too sacred to ignore. But with hope came fear. What if they had forgotten her? What if time had replaced her in their hearts? What if her presence now brought confusion? Not comfort, her pause paced the edges of her world, more restless with each passing hour. Because something inside her had already decided even before the humans confirmed, even before the journey began. Something ancient and defiant refused to let the thread go thin or break or fade. If they remembered her, she had to find out. And if they didn't, she would remember for them for all the days she called into silence and heard no answer. The silence had ended now, it was time to go. The gate opened with a slow metallic groan, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The wind paused, the birds quieted, even the sky above stilled as a mirror stepped forward. Each movement measured her muscles tight with years of waiting and not knowing her head. Low ears, flicking eyes scanning the wide, unfamiliar space. The scent hit her, first sharp, then soft, then undeniable. It wrapped around her like warmth after cold, and she froze her breath, caught not in fear, but in something deeper, something close to recognition. Across the pen, 3 cheetahs stood still, older, taller, but their eyes, those eyes, held something she had not seen since the world broke and before thought could form. Her ears caught it, a sound high and uncertain, a single chirp, and her body turned, not slowly, but as if pulled by something stronger than instinct. Her gaze locked on the smallest one. His legs trembled, his head tilted just enough, and in that single, shared moment, time collapsed, years folded in on themselves. The silence shattered into memory and movement, and then she stepped forward, and then he ran, and then the others followed, and the space between them vanished in seconds as they collided, not with caution, but with gravity brushing against her, nuzzling her face, pressing into her sides, as if to make sure she was real. And she lowered her head to each of them. In turn, breathing them in, licking their fur, recognizing the scent beneath the years, the pain, and they made no sound except for the soft purrs, the slow deep exhales, and that first trembling note of a broken song made whole again. No one watching moved. No one spoke, because there are things too sacred for language, and this moment belonged to the bond that had never truly broken. Only waited, curled in silence for the moment it could be touched again. In the soft light of morning, she walked with them, not behind, not ahead, but beside her movements, no longer sharp with fear, but loose with quiet trust. And when one of them chirped low and playful, she answered not with words, but with a brush of her shoulder, a flick of her tail, the same way she had long ago before silence took her, when they lay together now, their bodies tangled, like roots around each other. She no longer kept one eye open the way she used to. Her breath deepened slow and full, and when one nudged his head under her chin, she didn't flinch. She leaned in and held there, not fast, not fierce, just long enough for memory to melt into presence. And when the smallest one paused in mid-step and turned to look at her, she met his gaze, and there was no doubt, no hesitation, only something warm and ancient that passed between them like a hand over a scar that no longer hurt. And though the world outside still moved fast, still forgot, still turned away, their little world stitched itself back together, not in grand gestures, but in the small, unspoken ways. They moved closer. They played again. They trusted again, and slowly. What had been broken didn't disappear, but no longer defined them. Because sometimes healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's a body leaning against another, a shared breath, a silent understanding that even lost time can't kill, what never stopped beating deep, down beneath the waiting, and in that stillness, after everything they weren't what they were before. They were something new, something whole, something found. Some bonds are not broken by time or silence or distance. They do not ask for words or promises. They simply endure quietly beneath the noise, beneath the absence waiting. And when the moment comes, when eyes meet again, and breath catches, and memory stirs, they rise like light through cracks, steady and whole. What was once lost is not the same when it returns, but it is real. And it is enough, because true connection doesn't fade. It waits patiently at the edge of every day until it's needed most, and then, without warning, it comes back. Not to remind us of what we had, but to show us that love never left. It only paused until we were ready to feel it again.